Welcome back to the Sports Wrap with Tim Britton for the second night in a row, talking Red Sox as spring training nears down at Fort Myers. We talked about David Price last night. Big question, the rest of the rotation. I think 2 through 5, we don't know what we're getting out of these guys. How do you project the rotation?
Yeah, it's not one big question, it's 4 big questions the rest of the way. You look at Clay Buchholz, it's the age-old question with Buchholz, which is he'll be pretty good when he pitches. How much is he going to pitch? He was really rounding into form really May and June last year, and then that big start against the Yankees in July was the last we saw of him.
Right.
So we'll see if a full offseason gets him back healthy and whether he can give them, maybe 100. You don't hope for 200 innings out of him. You hope for maybe 160 to 180.
And a contract year too, right?
Right. Well, he's got one more option after this, and then Rick Porcello is maybe the guy that they're hoping the most to take that leap, considering what he did his last, I think, 8 starts coming off the disabled list, looked more like the Rick Porcello they thought they were trading for. Right. A guy who relies more on the sinker rather than elevating the fastball, which led to some big home run totals against him. If he can be that guy, he's not an ace the way they said he was going into last year, but a reasonable second option. And then Eduardo Rodriguez trying to build off last year, stop tipping pitches, and Joe Kelly, he's got great stuff. Let's see if he can do anything with that consistently the way he did last August before he was shelved at the end of the year.
Yeah, a lot of question marks with that rotation, but a lot of upside too. All right, offensively, when you look at that young outfield with Xander Bogaerts, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Rusney Castillo, obviously Betts and Rusney and Xander even at shortstop are kind of that young core. Do you see those guys making an additional leap from what they did last year? And we still don't really know if Bradley Jr. is a legitimate big leaguer. What's the status with him?
Yeah, there are more questions there with, I think, especially Bradley and Castillo, because we saw Bradley for basically a month last year looked like Barry Bonds. He hit 440 with like a 900 slugging percentage, was just off the charts offensively. And the rest of the time bookending that was the guy we had seen in 2013 and 2014, where you're not really sure if he's a major league offensive player. I think with him, his defensive capabilities, especially now that he's going to be playing center field full time, can kind of, the offensive bar isn't as high for him. If he can be a steadier player, instead of this back and forth kind of undulating guy the way he's been, that helps you. Castillo might be a bigger concern because he's a guy they signed to play center field. Now he's playing left. You're supposed to be more of a power hitter in left field in a corner outfield spot. We haven't seen that from him. We haven't seen an ability to stay on the field and produce consistently just yet. So I think he's maybe the biggest offensive question mark on this team going into next year.
All right, now we talked about this a little bit last night with the bullpen. Craig Kimbrell, obviously a power arm. They beefed up the back end of the bullpen, something that they didn't have last year. How do you see that? Maybe it's not as good as the Yankees, but if they can get their starter into the 7th, you feel pretty confident they can close the door?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a bullpen in Major League history that looks as good as the Yankees on paper with those 3 guys at the end. But when you add Kimbrell and Carson Smith, a guy who had some closing experience last year in Seattle and throws high 90s with a wicked slider, you add those guys to Koji Uehara in the back end. Junichi Tazawa's a bit of a question mark coming off his worst season and with so much wear and tear on that arm over the last couple of years. I think that's why they went out and got Smith as added depth in the earlier innings. You look at, the starter can give you 6, and I think that's what they'll be looking for out of those 4 guys we talked about behind Price. Get us through 6, hand the ball to Smith or Tazawa in the 7th, to Uehara in the 8th, and Kimbrell in the 9th. It looks a lot better than when Gene Machi and Robbie Ross Jr. were closing late in the year last year.
All right, I want to talk about the middle going up the infield here. When you think about Pedroia and Xander Bogaerts, has he kind of passed the baton, Pedroia to Xander, as perhaps production-wise the team leader? And do you think Pedroia can still be productive at his age? Furthermore, who's catching?
Well, with Pedroia, the offense really came back for him last year. We talked so much the last few off seasons. Where's the power going to come from with Dustin Pedroia? Is it gone for good? And he showed it last year. He had his highest slugging percentage, his most home runs since 2012, and that's even with missing the time he did with a hamstring injury. This offseason, he's trying to get back to being a more athletic all-around player. His defense fell off a little bit last year. He wasn't the elite defender he's been in years past. Bogaerts was way better defensively than I think anyone expected. I think that might be his peak already. We'll see if he can do that again. Guys don't tend to get this, continue to stay getting better defensively even at his age. Behind the plate, I think Blake Swihart's your everyday catcher to start the year. We'll see where Christian Vasquez is coming off Tommy John surgery. I think he had it like April 2nd. You think it's a full year recovery, and catchers who've had it in the past, guys like Matt Wieters have often said, you've got to be patient.
Right.
You can't rush this back. I think Vasquez would love to be there opening day, but you've got the luxury of taking it slow with him, seeing what Swihart can do defensively, maybe bringing Vasquez along later in the year.
Okay, before I get your projections, I want to ask you about John Farrell. Such a unique situation last year. Some people questioning his job security if the Red Sox should let him go. Obviously, he had to deal with cancer, which he has since battled with. He'll be here in Fort Myers. How long is the leash for John Farrell right now, knowing that he possibly could have lost his job if his health was better last year?
Well, I think he's got at least a few months. It's not. I think Dave Dombrowski once fired a manager, 2 weeks into the season in Detroit. I don't think we're going to see that. And he's, one thing Dombrowski has done is stuck with a lot of the people that the Red Sox had when he was hired. He hasn't made this huge sea change in personnel. So I think he wants to see what Farrell is. This is a World Series winning manager, guy who beat Dombrowski's team in 2013 in the ALCS. So I think he wants to see what he has in John Farrell. They know they've got a reasonable backup in Torey Lovello, who they reached that agreement with at the end of last season in case things didn't work out with Farrell, either health-wise this offseason or early next season. So it could get a little awkward between the two of them if things go south. So that's why I think a good start is extremely important for this team this year.
All right, let's get your projections for how the AL East unfolds and whether or not the Red Sox make the playoffs. And if you haven't put it out there yet, your World Series pick.
Oh man, I hadn't even started thinking about that.
All right, well, you can come back later and give it to us.
With the AL East, I think Toronto is the team that won it last year. They've obviously lost Price to the Red Sox, but they got Marcus Stroman back for the entire season. That offense looks so good with Donaldson, Tulowitzki, Bautista, Encarnacion, Chris Colabello. That's a deep offense. Russell Martin even. That's as good an offense as there is in baseball. Their rotation isn't as strong as it was last year, but I still probably give them the edge in the division with the Red Sox and the Yankees right there behind them. This time of year, I'm always pretty conservative. I think the Red Sox are like an 84, 85 win team. That's what I've thought the last several years. I've been wrong in either direction. But I think that puts them right in contention for that wild card spot, for one of those two wild card spots in an American League, in an AL East and an American League as a whole that doesn't have that dominant team. It's not the old 98 Yankees or 03 Yankees and Red Sox battling back and forth. It's a lot flatter landscape, which makes it, I think, a lot more fascinating going into the year. Yeah, with the two wild cards now, everyone's kind of in contention until the last few weeks. All right, Tim Britton, good stuff. Good luck in Florida. Read his work on projo.com in the Providence Journal. And what is your Twitter handle? At Tim Britton.
At Tim Britton, spelled as it sounds. All right, thanks so much, Tim, and we'll be back right after this.